在做简报的时候，很多人在呈现数字或者是那种 high-tech information 的时候，会站在自己的角度而忽略了听众的想法。也因此有很多人就是听众他会开始分心或者是放空。那今天的单元来教大家该怎么把这些比较干比较 dry 的 information 变得更有意义呢？ Hello， 欢迎来到商业英语 Career Plus 的 podcast。 在这边我们利用多年国际职场与教学经验，带给大家最真实与贴切的职场英语知识。Hi, I'm Sherry, founder of Executive Plus. As a language trainer and certified coach, I've trained hundreds of managers from Fortune 500 companies such as Dior, Google, and Deloitte & Touche.
And I'm Nick, Director of Communication Strategy at Presentality. I've helped startups raise millions of US dollars in funding and trained executives of publicly listed companies to present on the global stage. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 19 of the Career Plus podcast. This week, we want to talk a bit about how to take these sort of either scientifically or medically or technically difficult concepts and how to make them more accessible to your audience or to really help them understand the importance of what you do.
所以我们今天特别想要就是要来分享给大家跟教大家该怎么样把这些比较high tech 或者是比较 complex 的 information 在做简报的时候，在跟人家做一些 presentation 的时候，怎么样把这些 information 变成是观众能够听得懂，而且是他们能够对他们来讲是有意义的 information.
Right.And this episode is a bit inspired. This past Sunday was National STEM Day. And for those of you not familiar with STEM, STEM was a movement in education to promote science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Recently, it's also been transformed to include arts, so it's National STEAM Day.So, for this episode, we wanted to encourage anyone with this kind of STEM background the ability to really articulate what's going on, what's their expertise, but do it in a way that anyone can understand. I've worked a lot with medical device companies or very cutting-edge technology companies, and a lot of people with R&D or medical backgrounds or PhDs have a tendency to just throw very dry scientific or mathematical concepts at an audience, even an expert audience, and are unable to really grab people's attention and bring them into understanding the importance of what's going on. And this has even happened where you're having like middle management give reports, like end-of-year strategy reports to the upper management.And they just throw all these charts and reports. And the upper management, who, this is their company, looks at them and goes, so what do you want me to do? Like, great, you have a chart, you have an Excel sheet, and I have no idea what I should be doing with this information.
那刚刚 Nick 有讲说，其实在我们的工作当中，尤其是 Nick， 那我们常常会面对非常多的公司，那可能是主管，他可能已经是老板了，他们的公司常常都是这种研发这种高科技非常 complex 非常厉害的一些产品。那你也会发现他们在他们也必须要跟 investor pitch 或者是跟他们自己的大老板 pitch 的时候，或者是做 presentation 的时候，他们就会开始放一些很深度的那种 like graphs, right?Yeah,
they have graphs, charts. I've literally watched people just put Excel files on a PowerPoint slide, and you're just like, oh.
对，其实有很多人会觉得说，我是在 present 给我这个产业的人听，他们一定听得懂，没有错，他们懂，但是他们懂的是这种 you're talking about like the breadth of the knowledge, right?
Right. So it's like when you're looking at, say, a CEO. his job is to look at the overall vision. Yeah, of course they need to know how their company works or what's going on, but their job is to look at an overall vision of where the company is going. Or take another example like investors. There are certain investors that are, say, specialists in medical devices. And so a lot of doctors will go, oh, no, it's fine. The investor knows what I'm talking about. But again, their job is to understand the entire landscape of what's happening in medical innovation. If your innovation is really that innovative, or your idea is really that cutting edge, they should never have as deep a knowledge as you.
Right.
So it still becomes up to you to explain to them, what does it mean?
Right.
And in a way that they can quickly grasp. You know, whether it comes to an investor or a lot of times people know with their boss, patience and time is not something they have a lot of.
所以第一个，他们对于你的工作上面，他们可能对于你的这个广，他们了解这个这些知识，但是他不可能会跟你了解的那种深度是一样，是不可能的嘛。你一定是你这工作上面的 expert， 所以 it's up to you if you want to really make this understandable for your audience, right? Yeah, it's really up to you. But, you know, I think...Obviously, 那刚刚 Nick 有提到说大家的时间都非常的有限，所以如果你能够在短时间就把你这些非常 complex 的 information 可以转成他们能够听得懂，大家都能够了解的 information， 那当然我觉得对你一定是有加分的效果。
Yeah. So there's just two really easy layers that you need to consider with this. The first layer is simply how do you draw someone's attention to the key number, the key statistic, or if you're doing a PowerPoint, like the key graph. So if I was talking about a very difficult concept, either scientifically, mathematically, or engineering, the first thing I might do is just point out my key number. And be like, what this number tells us. Or here's a lot of numbers on this chart, but the key thing you need to look at is this. And what it tells us is...
Yeah, so 我觉得在这个部分呢，我想分享给大家就是我们在不管我们是要用什么 numbers， 我们可能要讲 trend， 我们要讲的是几趴那种 percentage， 或者是要讲你的 increasing trend， 或者是你的 decreasing trend， 或者你有可能有很多 certification， 好了，有在高科技的部分他们常常会有非常多的 certification， 那这些所代表的到底是什么？所以你就可以用语言上面你可以说 you know what this number represents is that, so what this trend tells us is that, or what this percentage means is that, or what this increasing trend shows us is that. Okay, so you got represents, tells us, means, and shows us. You know, 这些我觉得很简单的一些 vocabulary， 但是当你把它用上的话，你可以非常明确而且很精准的去表达你所要呈现这些 information 到底对他们的意义在哪里。
Yeah, and what you're doing with this is just sending that foundation. This is the key number. And this happens to me all the time where it's like, I remember one of the first companies that I worked with was a liquid biopsy company. And what they did was like there was only less than five companies in the world who were building this technology. And they gave a 45-minute presentation. And at the end of it, my business partners, I looked at them and go, so what do you do?
45 minutes.
Yeah, 45 minutes later, we're just like, I learned more about like statistics and sensitivity and specificity. All these terms were just like, oh, what? And when it came down to really working them, it came down to one statistic. And the statistic was 45%. There was just one random slide where they had shoved this 45% cancer detection success like into a corner. And I had to ask them, I was like, so what does that mean? Like that doesn't sound good. If you were like, we have a 45%, like we have less than a half a chance to detect cancer. And it was through a discussion that they said, okay, this is actually really good. And here's why. What this number represents is our average ability to detect cancer from stage 1 to stage 4. And they said, at stage 1, we have a 15% chance to detect cancer. And again, I had asked them, it's like, that sounds bad. If someone was like, my brand new cutting edge technology can only detect at 15%. And they said, the industry standard at stage 1 or pre-stage 1 is 3%.
Okay. So when you do the comparison, right away, 15% sounds pretty darn good.
Yeah. So it's like when you say the industry standard is 3% and we can detect at 15%, that sounds amazing. But what it took is they really had to explain what's the context of this number, right? It's not just, everyone understands that 15% at stage 1 is amazing. Yeah. Maybe an oncology specialist will know that difference. But if you're talking to non-oncology specialists or non-medical experts, it could have taken 10 seconds. We go, with our technology, we are able to detect at 15%, whereas the industry standard at this stage is 3.
So that's the most important sentence right there. Right. Yeah.
And it's really, again, what does this number mean? What is the context for that?
所以真的我们刚刚所讲的，真的当你要讲一个 percentage 15%好了，15%听起来好或者是不好，这个是听众没有办法去了解的。就算他可能对于你的这个产业稍微有一些了解，但是你还是需要花一些时间去explain 这个 context， 这个 15% 代表是什么。那如果你的竞争对手都是 3% 好了，他们 3% 的 detection rate， 那你 15% 当然就是 way above the standard, right? So this is something that is the context. 那你这个部分就是要靠你来去解释给大家听。
Yeah, and this also happens, let's say, in the manufacturing industry when you're talking about yield rates, which means if we make 1,000 pieces, how many of them are NG? How many of them are defective? And giving people a context of how that works, because every industry is different.
Yes.
The clothing yield rate for material or fabric is very different than, say, the motherboard or semiconductor yield rate. So even though you know these numbers, always giving someone a clear baseline. Or let's say I'm presenting internally into my company. And, rather than what I've seen all the time, giving someone an Excel file sheet to your boss and going, he should understand what's going on, is pulling out those key numbers. Like, here's our key numbers for how we're doing better. Last year, this was our yield rate. This year, this is our yield rate. Or our defect rate has gone down. And what does this mean? Or what did we do to get that?
所以真的要 avoid 就是把整个的 Excel spreadsheet 就放在你的 PowerPoint 上面，因为其实这样子大家没有办法马上看到你想要呈现的是什么。
Yeah, so bringing attention to those key numbers. This is all that first layer. Now, the second layer of making information accessible or interesting is usually how do you give some kind of metaphor or how do you connect it to something in someone's brain? And this is where you can have a lot more fun with numbers because this is where you get to tell stories.
I think it is a bit more challenging, but I think any good math teachers,
yes,
any good math teachers would be able to do this. For me, when I was at school, I definitely struggled with math, but, sometimes you would come across, certain instructor, they're just so passionate about their work. They're able to turn math into something so easy to understand by telling stories.
Yeah. And this is true for any subject. Like for me, it was history. I think most people in Taiwan hate history. And it's because they probably went to a classroom where their teacher said, important day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, person A did what? Person B did what? And it's just this list of facts. But when I had a professor in college who would literally just tell these intricate, amazing stories that would start in Europe and end up in Asia and blah, blah, and it would just become enthralling. And so this is something you can do. It's like any kind of information, no matter how complex or how dry, when tied into a story, or specifically for this case, metaphors, it becomes so much easier to digest and so much more interesting.
所以其实你不管是多么的干的知识或多么 complex 多么 difficult 的一些 information， 如果你用 metaphor 就是我们的比喻， 其实你会把这个东西变成更能够让人家接受度会提高。So I think, Nick, you have some really good examples to tell us about these metaphors.
Yeah,
right?
if anyone wants to see metaphors or really complex ideas turned into great stories, go watch a TED Talk by Hans Rosling. Hans, H-A-N-S, Rosling, R-O-S-L-I-N-G. He was a renowned economist. Very, very well respected. He gave like 5 TED Talks. And of course, like main stage TED Talks. These are very intelligent people. But he didn't throw scientific economic concepts at them because they're smart people. He told amazing stories and he broke them down. So I really recommend, if you want great examples, go there. But to give people a few examples of, a way that a really difficult concept could be turned into a metaphor. A few years ago, my company was working with a cutting-edge brain surgery device company. And they were trying to explain the trend of intercerebral hemorrhaging. How do again, you don't need to know. The idea is if you have a blood clot or there's bleeding inside of your brain, how do they get the blood out?
Okay.
And how do they do it in a way that doesn't do more damage to you?
Okay.
All right. So here's their innovation. And when we were trying to come up with a way to really explain to people how important this innovation is one of my partners came up with a brilliant metaphor. He said, right now, in the world of brain surgery, if doctor needs to put a hole in your head to stop your brain from bleeding, current technology, the best they can do is create a golf ball size hole in your head. Like that's huge. If we think golf ball is small, but now put a hole in your head that's golf ball size.
Okay. So 高尔夫球的大小的一个洞。
He says, right now the innovations, they're talking about minimally invasive or microsurgery. He goes, but even at that innovation, we're talking the size of a dime.
Okay.
Right? A US coin. So roughly the size of a Taiwan $1 coin. It's an improvement, right? Golf ball to dime size. But our innovation allows us to do the brain surgery with something that's the size of a pea.
Yeah.
And these are all everyday household items. But it gives someone a very visual concept of the difference between a golf ball and a pea.
你会发现如果他在这个情况上他如果用了比如说通常我们这个做 brain surgery 的时候我们这个洞大概圆周长是多少 like a, circumference
Yeah, it's
diameter
it's 5 centimeters.
Yeah, 如果他给你这些数字其实有的时候很多人对这种数字没有办法那么快速因为我觉得大部分人没有办法很快速就可以去 visualize比如说这个洞的大小到底是多大但是如果你用 golf ball 你用台湾的1块钱你用这种豆子的大小这个是所有人都可以马上就可以想象出来的大小
And another great example is, in medical innovation, one of the big things coming up is immunotherapy, IO therapy. Basically is rather than using an outside drug like used in chemotherapy to kill cancer cells is you actually train your body to kill cancer cells. And one of the best explanations that I ever read about how this works broke it down into something anyone could understand. And the idea was this. Inside our body, we have white blood cells. We basically have soldiers inside our body whose job is to eliminate and kill any kind of foreign virus that may harm us. Okay. What cancer cells are able to do is they're able to disguise themselves from our white blood cells. They basically have camouflage. And so the way that we handle cancer now is we hire outside foreign mercenary soldiers through chemotherapy or any other kind of treatment, and we put them in our body to do the fighting. The promise of immunotherapy is you don't bring foreign soldiers into your body, is you actually bring trainers in who can come in and train the soldiers in your body to recognize the disguised spies.
So I think immediately I can start picturing, those white blood cells, what it looks like, and the trainers, they're right there, helping them.
Like recognize spot, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, of course, it's far more scientifically complex about how we do the training, but it gives you a really good baseline.
Yeah.
And so anytime you can come up with this sort of metaphor that gives someone a strong sense of why this is important or how this works, it always makes it more interesting to them. And of course, if they're interested, they want to have the longer, more scientifically complex conversation.
Right.
But if they're not interested, then they're just going to be like, oh, yeah, okay, and then walk away.
Yeah. So I think, this is a really good information for everyone. You don't have to be in the medical industry. You don't have to be in the engineer, industry to really need this information. 就算你现在在时尚的产业，就算你现在在 retail 产业，你一定也会碰到数字跟 presenting 数字 trends or numbers and percentage. 那你要怎么把这些变成是有意义的 number?Right? What is, making something that's from dry to something that's very meaningful for your audience. Doesn't matter if it's for the clients or it doesn't matter if it's for investors or for your boss.
Right. And that gets into the key that you're talking about is how do you make a number meaningful? The metaphors, the stories, and everything is just a vehicle to give someone a context for why this number matters, why this technique or this technology matters.
Yeah. 所以我们刚刚在最前面我们有稍微讲到了，比如说你要怎么样把这些 key numbers 找出来，那这些 key numbers 所代表的是什么？那我们就可以用 represents, tells us, means, and shows us 这些很简单的一些方式去 indicate 这些意义在哪里 and 如果你能的话，你也可以稍微试着用一些 metaphor 去把这些很干的一些知识能够变成非常有意义、非常有趣的 information.
Yeah. So we hope that the next time that you need to give a very number or scientifically heavy presentation, you think carefully as what stories can you tell, what metaphors you can use, and how do you get people's understanding of the key number and what it means for them.
So I hope you enjoyed the episode today, and we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
如果你喜欢我们的 podcast， 欢迎来追踪我们的主管英文 Executive Plus 的 Facebook。那也可以写信到我们的信箱yourcareerplus@gmail.com